Hey everyone. Today we're digging into something that's a little misunderstood by a lot of people working with cloud services, and that's the shared responsibility model. Now look, it sounds like a marketing term made up by cloud providers, but it's actually a really practical way of spelling out who's responsible for what when you move stuff to the cloud. Let me give you a quick flashback. Back when I was an IT admin, this was before the cloud was even a buzzword. If a server went down, that was on me. If it got hacked, also me. If the backup failed, yep, still me. Everything was running on an on-prem rack with a noisy aircon unit that we all owned, the hardware, the software, the data, the lot. But today, most businesses are using some sort of cloud service, something like Microsoft 365, AWS, Google Cloud, or even Dropbox or Xero. And that's where this model comes into play. So what is it? At its core, the shared responsibility model says that you and your cloud provider both have a role to play in security. Just because it's in the cloud does not mean security is handled. Let's use a simple analogy, like renting a house. If you rent, the landlord's job is to make sure the place is structurally sound, the roof doesn't leak, the doors lock, the smoke alarm works. But it's your job to actually lock the doors, turn on the alarm, and not leave your laptop in the front yard overnight. Same deal with cloud services. Let's say you're using AWS to host your web app. AWS takes care of the infrastructure, the physical servers, the networking backbone, the data center security, but you still have to secure the application, control access, manage encryption, and make sure you're patching regularly. Or with Microsoft 365, they make sure the email platform stays online and secure from their end. But if your staff are clicking on dodgy links, reusing passwords, or you've got no MFA in place, that's not on Microsoft, that's on you. This is where a lot of businesses fall over. They assume, oh, it's Microsoft, they've got it. Well, yes, for their bit, but you still have to secure your bit. Things like user training, device management, access policy, and log reviews, the usual fundamentals. Let's break it down to a typical split of responsibilities by the service type. Infrastructure as a service, IaaS. This is things like AWS EC2 or Azure VMs. You get the virtual machine and the networking. The provider secures the underlying infrastructure, but it's your responsibility for the OS, the apps, configs, firewalls, and patches. Platform as a service, or PaaS. Things like Google App Engine or Azure SQL. The provider manages the OS and the runtime, but you still control the code, your data, and any access to it. Software as a service, or SaaS. This is your M365, Xero, Canva. The vendors handle the stack, but you still manage who has access to it and what they can do. What are you actually responsible for as the customer? Here's a quick rundown. Data protection. You've got to protect your own data. That means access control, encryptions, backups, the whole CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. User access management. Set permissions properly, enforce strong passwords, use MFA. If you're still relying on passwords alone in 2025, then you're asking for trouble. Application security. If you've built an app on the cloud, you own the security of that app. That means secure coding, regular patching, and testing for vulnerabilities. Network controls. You need to configure things like firewalls, VPNs, and security groups. Just spinning up a VM and leaving RDP open to the world? That's a bad idea. Compliance and governance. Whether it's ISO 27001, the Essential 8, or a sector-specific regulation, compliance is still your job. The cloud doesn't make it go away. Meanwhile, your cloud provider handles things like physical security, locking down the data centers with guards, cameras, and access controls. Network infrastructure security. They're securing the backbone, the routers, the switches, the load balancers, and deploying tools like IDS and IPS. Host level security. They'll patch and secure the physical servers, the hypervisor layer, and the storage systems. Compliance certifications. Most major providers go through independent audits and hold certifications like ISO 27001, SOC 2, etc. This is part of how they prove that they're doing their part. So the provider secures the platform, but you secure how it's used. Here's a real-world example. Back in 2021, Microsoft's Power App platform had a big issue. Over 38 million records were accidentally exposed by a bunch of organizations. Names like Ford, American Airlines, and public health departments in the US. But here's the thing, it wasn't a Microsoft failure. The data exposure happened because the default settings were too open and customers didn't lock them down. So yeah, Microsoft provided the platform, but the misconfiguration? That was on the user. And this happens more often than you'd think. Imagine that happened to your business. Sensitive customer info, health data, or maybe financial records leak because someone didn't check a box. That's not just bad optics, that's a regulatory problem. In Australia, you'd likely trigger the notifiable data breach scheme with all the consequences that come with it. So here's the takeaways. Just because someone else is hosting your data doesn't mean they're protecting it in the way that you need. You've got to take responsibility from your end, understand where the line is, and don't assume your provider is going to pick up your slack. They're not, and they never will. If you're working towards something like ISO 27001, Essential 8, or SMB 1001, you need to clearly document where your responsibilities start and stop, especially if you're outsourcing anything. Trust is good, but verification and control is better. Know your role, educate your team, and review your configs like your business depends on it, because these days, it does. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe and stay secure.